Comparisons of Marvel's Avengers between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X continue showing the power advantage that the Xbox Series X has. So there's been a common theme throughout the beginning of this generation when it comes to comparing versions of games between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And that theme seems to be that on the Xbox Series X, we are getting games that are, when they're upgraded to the next generation, have better resolutions and have steady frame rates that are just slightly worse than the PlayStation 5s. However, the PlayStation 5 versions of these games are generally running at lower resolutions and missing some graphical elements. Before we get into this any further, if you guys are new here and you enjoy what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow and help grow this community so we can have some great conversations in the comments below. Now, there was another comparison for Marvel's Avengers, and it continues to give us this narrative about the Xbox Series X running at a better and higher resolution than the PlayStation 5. However, the performance is slightly better on the PlayStation 5, but not by a significant amount. So here are the results of these comparisons. So the three Marvel's Avengers versions have two display modes, 4K 30 FPS, and then the variable 4K at 60 FPS. In the 4K 30 FPS mode has slight improvement in reflections, textures, particles, and draw distance and shadows. In 4K 30 FPS mode, they all experience some small drops in resolution, although they keep the target set most of the time, especially on the Series X. In the FPS mode, however, for the first few minutes of the game, the PS5 resolution varies from 3840 by 2160p and 2560 by 1440p, but as soon as we get to the Quinjet and start missions with more open and loaded spaces, the usual resolution becomes 1920 by 2160p, while on the Series X, it stays at a dynamic 3840 by 1836p. And in this case, there is a clear advantage in the Xbox version. In the FPS mode, Series X maintains a higher draw distance, and there are slightly better loading times on the PS5, and the frame rate is quite stable in both modes and slightly better on the PlayStation 5. So that's pretty obvious what's going on here. The Xbox Series X, being the more powerful console, is able to push higher resolutions while keeping that steady frame rate when compared to the PlayStation 5. For the PlayStation 5 to keep the performance and have steady frame per second, they have to reduce the actual resolutions of the games to do this, as well as reduce things like the draw distance. Now, this isn't surprising. I've made plenty of videos on this talking about how I believe that the Xbox Series X is the more powerful console. It's really obvious. All you literally have to do is look at the specs of the consoles that the actual manufacturers have given us and not go into this stuff where people are trying to come up with all of these different reasonings and things why one console is more powerful or less powerful than the other. It's right there in front of you when you just look at the spec sheet. Now, I'm not a tech guy, so maybe that's why I look at it in such simple terms, but at the same time, I believe that these companies give us these spec sheets so that we can see all of the hardware that's inside the console, which gives us a pretty clear indication the difference between the two. Now, with that being said, it is still very early on in this generation, and at the same time, we can look at different things that is going on with the games, and why is the performance slightly better on the PlayStation 5, even though they have to reduce the resolutions, and why are there small frame drops with the Xbox Series X, even though it's keeping a higher resolution. None of these differences are that massive when you really look at it, but at the same time, one of the big reasons people have been trying to explain what is going on with the Xbox Series X when it comes to performance and things like that is the fact that the development kit is newer and it was sent out much later, and developers haven't had as much time to really understand it. And the PlayStation 5 development kit was pretty much the same as it was for the PlayStation 4. So there's this tweet here from Mr. Orange that shows a Remedy developer explaining what we have seen so far in terms of the PlayStation 5's performance versus the Xbox Series X's, and we're seeing that gap get smaller and smaller. And he just really talks about what everybody has been saying, and it is that it is because of the developer kit. So let's hear what he says.
It's early days, so there's still a lot of just system level issues and bugs that impact performance or cause crashes and things like that. It's just that's all going to get better. Sony kind of stuck to what worked, and they're sort of development software and tools were like pretty stable and good pretty early on. And this is one of the things that people don't really see. Like all of these impact like the performance that the consumer gets. And Microsoft opted to change quite a lot of things, which on the long run are probably good. But of course, it's just a bigger hurdle for us devs early on to kind of like, we got to rewrite a bunch of different things to really take advantage of specific features. And that's not that's not like a huge negative or anything. It's just what software development is like. But discussion like about teraflops, this and that, I'm just like, man, it's just numbers. Like ultimately matters so much more, and how.
So there you go. He clearly states there that one of the big reasons that the PlayStation 5 is having a slight performance advantage when it comes to the frames per second and stuff right now is because of the developer kits and how they use a developer kit for the PlayStation 5 that is very similar to the PlayStation 4. And with the Xbox Series X, they had to change a lot of things, and developers are still trying to learn it. They have to go ahead and optimize games with this new development kit while trying to push out a game for a specific date. So it takes a lot of time for these developers to be able to optimize for these games, and it's obviously a lot of hard work. So what I predict what we are going to see throughout this generation with the next generation games coming out in the future is that I think most of them on the PlayStation 5 are going to continue to perform the way that they are performing now, potentially having a slightly better performance and maybe slightly better resolutions. We will have to wait and see. But I think with the Xbox Series X, once the developers are able to fully figure out the development kit and are able to optimize better for these games on that console, we are going to see games running at higher resolutions than the PlayStation 5 while having less performance dips in the FPS. So probably locked 60 frames per second and potentially more graphical elements on the Xbox Series X versions for multi-platform games in particular. But that's just my prediction. I could be completely wrong on that. Just from what we've been seeing right now with these cross-generational games and how the Xbox Series X versions are running at higher resolutions while keeping that frame rate generally around 55 to 60 frames per second, whereas the PlayStation 5 versions are running in a lower resolution but keeping that locked 60 frames per second. I think that's kind of the change we'll see as we go through this generation. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. What do you think about the advantages of the Xbox Series X when it comes to the Avengers games, and what do you think this is going to mean going forward with these two consoles, especially now that we pretty much know that the developer kits are newer on the Xbox Series consoles and that it will still take time for the developers to really get a grasp of them. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you are new here and you enjoyed what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow and help grow this community so we can have some great conversations in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.